When you feel broken, the hardest thing to do is often the simplest, to actually admit it. Not to the world, not to your friends, but to yourself. Most people carry a quiet fear that if they acknowledge their pain, it will swallow them whole. So they bury it. They cover it with busyness, with noise, with pretending everything is fine. But rising begins in the exact opposite direction. It begins the moment you stop running from what hurts and allow your heart the dignity of being honest. You can't heal what you keep hidden. You can't rise from what you refuse to face. And you can't rebuild on foundations you're too afraid to inspect. There's something profoundly human about breaking. It's not a sign of personal failure. It's simply a reminder that you are alive, that you feel deeply, that your spirit is sensitive enough to be affected by the world. Some people spend their entire lives numbing themselves so they never feel anything at all. But the very fact that you feel pain means your heart is still capable of revival. And revival starts with truth. When you say, "I'm not okay," you're not falling apart. You're stepping into clarity. Clarity is a gift. It doesn't always feel like one, but it is. It shows you what needs to change. It reveals the patterns that have been draining you. It exposes the lies you believed, the burdens you carried alone, the exhaustion you labeled as normal. Acknowledging your brokenness is not about drowning in it. It's about finally seeing where you need to breathe. Most of us struggle because we treat brokenness like a personal indictment. We think, if I admit this, people will judge me. They'll think I'm weak. They'll think I should be past this by now. But strength has never meant pretending you're invincible. Strength is the courage to say, "This hurts, but I'm still here. I'm shattered, but I haven't given up." Real strength is quieter than we imagine. It is the strength of patience, of humility, of saying the words that are hardest to form, "I need help." But help can only find you where you actually are, not where you pretend to be. There is a strange freedom that comes with admitting your pain. It's like loosening a knot that has been tightening for years. You don't instantly feel healed, but you feel less suffocated. It allows you to take off the mask you've been wearing sometimes for so long that you began to believe it was your face. And when that mask falls away, you can finally breathe again. You can finally rest. You can finally begin. Acknowledging your brokenness also opens a door to compassion, both for yourself and for others. When you pretend you're fine, you become harsh toward your own mistakes, toward the imperfections of others. But when you recognize your own fragility, you begin treating yourself with the gentleness you've long deserved. You stop demanding perfection. You allow yourself the humanity of having limits, and in doing so, you also soften toward the world. You stop expecting everyone else to be flawless, because you know what it feels like to be painfully, achingly human. We're often afraid that if we acknowledge what hurts, we'll get stuck there. But you only get stuck in the pain you never face. Pain you confront becomes a path. Pain you bury becomes a prison. One traps you, the other transforms you. Rising starts with seeing the wound, not because you want to sit with it forever, but because you want to finally move through it. Sometimes people hear the word broken and assume it means ruined, but brokenness is not the end of your story. It is simply the moment your old life becomes too small for who you are becoming. It's the moment your heart refuses to keep carrying what has been suffocating it. Breaking is not failure, it is transition, and transitions are messy, uncomfortable, and raw, but they are also sacred. They are the birthplace of transformation. When you acknowledge your brokenness, you allow yourself to feel the emotions you've been avoiding: sadness, disappointment, fear, loneliness. And though these feelings are uncomfortable, they are not dangerous. What's dangerous is locking them away until they explode. What's dangerous is pretending you don't need rest, pretending you don't need boundaries, pretending you can carry everything without collapsing. But the moment you say, "This is too heavy," You begin letting go of what was never meant to be yours in the first place. There is a reason people who rise the highest are often people who have once been broken. When you hit a low point, you become deeply aware of what truly matters. You stop wasting energy on superficial things. You strip away the illusions, the noise, the expectations that once controlled you. In a strange way, brokenness purifies you. It removes everything false, and what remains is real. When you choose honesty with yourself, you begin living from a place of depth rather than performance. You begin making decisions that align with your spirit rather than your fears, and that alignment is what allows you to rise, not in a sudden burst, but in a steady, unshakable climb. You rise because you finally understand what hurt you, and you commit to not repeating the same patterns. You rise because you finally stop pretending you don't need healing. You rise because you allow yourself to feel, to grieve, to rest, to rebuild. You rise because you stop carrying the world on shoulders that were never meant to bear that weight. You rise because acknowledging your brokenness frees you from the illusion that you must be perfect to be worthy. And perhaps most importantly, you rise because in the quiet honesty of your own heart, you realize you were never alone, even when you felt most shattered. Because rising begins the moment you finally whisper to yourself, "This is where I am, and this is not where I will stay." There comes a moment in every person's journey when the greatest battle is not what is happening around them, but what is happening within them. It is the quiet conversation you have with yourself in the early hours when the world is asleep. It is the whisper of doubt that echoes louder than the praise of 100 people. It is the story you silently repeat day after day, sometimes without even realizing how powerful it is. And for many of us, the reason we struggle to rise is not because we are incapable, but because the story we tell ourselves keeps pulling us back down. Every one of us carries an internal narrative. It's shaped by past experiences, by the words others have thrown at us, by our own interpretations of moments we barely understood, especially when we were young. Over time, these fragments form a script that plays automatically in the background. You may not notice it, but it influences how you see the world, how you see yourself, and even how you behave. When you feel broken, this script becomes even louder and often even more distorted. It tells you that you're not enough, that you're defined by what hurt you, that your best days are behind you, that the damage is too deep to repair. And if you're not careful, you start believing it. The problem is not simply that the story is negative, it's that it becomes familiar. And the human heart, even in pain, clings to what is familiar. We repeat narratives not because they're true, but because they feel comfortable. They feel predictable. They feel safe in a strange, self-defeating way. But you cannot rise from a place where your own thoughts keep you chained. You cannot step into the future if you keep rewriting the past into every new beginning. Rewriting your story doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. It means refusing to let it be the only lens through which you see your worth. It means taking authority over your narrative instead of letting old wounds dictate your identity. It means choosing to view yourself not as a broken chapter, but as a story still unfolding, with pages yet to be written. And this shift, it changes everything. Ask yourself, what have you been telling yourself for years? What words run through your mind at your lowest moments? What beliefs have you allowed to settle like dust in the corners of your heart, unquestioned, unchallenged, unchecked? Sometimes the most empowering act you can perform is simply pausing long enough to ask, is this story even true? Because more often than not, the story you inherited was never yours to begin with. You absorbed someone else's judgment, someone else's anger, someone else's insecurity, someone else's temporary opinion of you that you turned into a lifelong identity. But no matter how long you have carried that narrative, you are allowed to put it down. When you feel broken, your inner voice becomes magnified. You begin interpreting everything through the lens of your wounds. A failure becomes proof of inadequacy. A setback becomes a sign that nothing will ever change. A moment of weakness becomes your entire identity. And yet, rising requires the complete opposite. It requires teaching your heart a new language, not the language of shame, but the language of possibility. Not the language of defeat, but the language of resilience. Not the language of this is who I'll always be, but this is who I am becoming. You must understand, your thoughts are not passive. They shape your emotions. Your emotions shape your actions. Your actions shape your days, and your days shape your life. Change the thought, and you begin changing the story. Change the story, and you begin transforming your life. Your narrative either builds you or breaks you. It either frees you or imprisons you. And the moment you decide to rewrite it, even if the rewriting is slow and imperfect, you begin reclaiming power you didn't realize you had lost. You don't have to go from self-doubt to unstoppable confidence overnight. The shift is gradual. It begins with small internal corrections. When your mind says, I always fail, you pause and say, no, sometimes I fall, but I get back up. When your heart says, I'm not worthy, you whisper back, I am learning to see my worth. When your pain says, you'll never heal, you counter it with, I am healing, even if the progress is slow. These are not cliches. These are seeds. And seeds grow into stories that reshape your entire world. Most people expect transformation to be loud and dramatic, but it often begins quietly, in the privacy of your heart, where no one sees the struggle. And that's fine. Not every battle needs an audience. What matters is that you are fighting. What matters is that you are refusing to let the old story go unchallenged. What matters is that you are choosing to speak to yourself with dignity, with mercy, with hope. Rewriting your story also means giving yourself permission to outgrow identities that no longer fit. There are parts of you that were formed in survival mode, parts that helped you endure, helped you cope, helped you protect yourself. But when you're ready to rise, those same parts may hold you back. The version of you that learned to hide doesn't serve the version of you that's ready to heal. The version of you that accepted mistreatment doesn't serve the version of you learning self-respect. The version of you that believed you were unworthy cannot accompany the version of you stepping into strength. There comes a point when you must tell yourself, I am allowed to become someone new. That one sentence opens a door many people spend their entire lives searching for. You are not betraying your past by outgrowing it. You are honoring it by evolving. When you shift your internal narrative, you begin viewing challenges differently. What once felt like evidence of failure now feels like opportunity for growth. What once triggered hopelessness now triggers determination. You stop interpreting every setback as a final verdict. You begin seeing your life with a wider lens, a deeper understanding, a more grounded heart. You stop expecting perfection. You start celebrating progress, and slowly, the voice inside you becomes less harsh, less fearful, less unforgiving. Eventually, something beautiful happens. The brokenness that once defined your story transforms into a chapter rather than the entire book. You stop identifying with your wounds and begin identifying with your healing. And even before your circumstances change, you start walking with a different posture. Lighter, clearer, more anchored. That is the power of rewriting your story. It is the moment you stop living as a victim of what happened to you and start rising as the author of what comes next. And you realize, perhaps for the first time, that the story you choose to tell yourself becomes the story you choose to live. There is a point in every person's journey where simply surviving is no longer enough. You wake up, you go through the motions, you tick boxes, you smile when you must, you endure when you have to, but something inside you feels hollow. You feel like you're drifting, not living. And the truth is, many people spend years, sometimes decades, in this state without even realizing it. They confuse movement with progress. They confuse activity with purpose. They confuse endurance with living. But surviving is not the same as rising. Surviving is what you do when you're trying to protect what's left of you. Rising is what you do when you're ready to build what's ahead of you. When you feel broken, it's easy to slip into survival mode because it feels safe. It feels familiar. It asks nothing of you except to make it to the next day. And when your heart is tired, survival mode seems merciful. But survival mode, if you stay there too long, becomes a trap. It stops being a temporary refuge and begins turning into a permanent mindset. One day, you look in the mirror and realize you've been living in reaction to life, rather than consciously shaping it. You find yourself waiting for things to get better, instead of stepping into the role of making them better. At some point, you must decide to shift from surviving to living with purpose. That shift doesn't happen in one grand moment. It happens in the quiet decision to stop drifting and start directing. It happens when you stop letting circumstances dictate your identity. It happens when you stop letting fear be the loudest voice in the room. It happens when you recognize that your life is worth more than the bare minimum of emotional existence. When you make this shift, something changes inside you. You no longer wake up thinking, "How do I get through this day?" Instead, you begin asking, "How do I shape this day? How do I bring meaning to it?" Even if your situation hasn't changed yet, the posture of your heart has changed. You no longer live defensively. You live intentionally. You begin to move with a sense of direction that doesn't depend on everything being perfect. You start making choices that align with the person you want to become, not the pain you've already survived. Purpose mode is not about having everything figured out. It is not about grand gestures or monumental achievements. It is about living with clarity. It is about knowing what matters enough that you refuse to waste your life on what does not. It is about rising each day with the understanding that your existence has weight, has meaning, has value. And when you understand that, even your smallest actions begin to feel different. You speak differently. You walk differently. You carry yourself differently because you are no longer living from a place of shortage. You are living from a place of intention. When you shift into purpose mode, you also begin to see your struggles differently. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What can I learn from this? How does this shape me? How is this building me?" And that shift alone can turn your entire life around. Because pain without purpose feels unbearable, but pain that is understood, interpreted, and integrated becomes strength. It becomes experience. It becomes wisdom. And that wisdom becomes the foundation upon which you rise. One of the most profound realizations you'll ever have is that purpose is not something you find, it's something you choose. It's not something that falls from the sky. It's not something that arrives with applause or clarity. It is a commitment you make to yourself that your life will not be wasted on fear, on regrets, on excuses, on the narrative of being broken. It is the decision to rise deliberately, to grow consciously, to heal actively. And that requires something many people overlook: discipline. Purpose without discipline is a dream, but purpose with discipline becomes a life. Discipline is what transforms your intentions into reality. Discipline is what allows your healing to be more than emotional. It becomes structural. Discipline is what helps you build the habits that align with the person you want to be, even when you don't feel like it. And every time you choose discipline over comfort, you reinforce a message to your heart: I am moving forward. Even if the steps are small, even if the progress feels slow, you are moving. And movement in the right direction is more powerful than perfection. Purpose mode also forces you to examine what you've been allowing into your life. Because when you're just trying to survive, you tolerate things that drain you. You accept relationships that diminish you, you allow habits that weaken you. But when you shift into purpose, those things feel heavy. They feel misaligned. You begin to sense what no longer fits the direction of your life. And with time, you learn to release what cannot come with you into your rising. That release isn't coldness, it's clarity. You stop carrying what carries you away from who you are meant to be. The shift from survival to purpose also brings you face with your potential. And potential can be intimidating. Because once you acknowledge you are capable of more, you can no longer hide behind excuses. You can no longer blame the world for your stagnation. You must confront the fact that you were created with the capacity to rise, but rising is a choice. And that realization can feel both liberating and heavy. But it is always transformative. There will be days when purpose feels out of reach. Days when survival mode pulls you back with familiar whispers of doubt. On those days, you remind yourself that purpose is not perfection. Purpose is perseverance. It is the refusal to give up on your own becoming. It is the quiet, steady commitment to live a life that feels aligned, meaningful, and whole. When you begin living with purpose, even your brokenness transforms. It stops being a weight and becomes a teacher. It stops being a limitation and becomes direction. You stop asking how to escape your pain and start asking how to grow from it. You realize that rising is not about erasing the struggle. It is about redefining your relationship with it. And once you understand that, you are no longer just surviving your life. You are shaping it, directing it, living it with depth and intention. And ultimately, shifting from survival mode to purpose mode becomes the moment you stop merely existing and start truly rising. There is a quiet truth that many people overlook. You don't rebuild your life in a single moment of inspiration. You rebuild it through small, consistent actions that often feel too simple to matter. When you feel broken, you naturally look for something big to rescue you, a breakthrough, a miracle, a sudden shift that erases the heaviness in your chest. But the irony is that genuine transformation rarely happens in dramatic ways. It happens in the small disciplines you repeat when no one is watching. It happens in the choices that look insignificant on the surface, but eventually shape the entire direction of your life. When your heart is wounded or your spirit feels dim, even basic tasks feel overwhelming. Getting out of bed feels like a victory. Taking a deep breath feels like progress. And that's why building micro habits is so essential. They don't demand perfection. They don't require energy you don't have. They ask only for small, steady steps. Steps that remind you that you're still moving, still healing, still capable of rising. Most people underestimate the power of tiny habits because they are looking for instant results. But tiny habits don't work instantly. They work gradually, quietly, almost invisibly at first. And then, one day, you look back and realize the small practices you committed to have become the reason you're standing stronger, the reason your mind is clearer, the reason your heart feels lighter, the reason hope returned. When you're trying to rise from a place of brokenness, these micro habits serve as anchors. They give you structure when everything feels chaotic. They give you direction when your thoughts feel scattered. They give you a sense of momentum when your life feels like it's standing still. And the beauty is that micro habits don't need to be grand to be effective. They just need to be consistent. A few minutes of reflection each morning can start shifting the story you tell yourself. A few minutes of gratitude can start reshaping the lens through which you view your life. A few minutes of stillness can begin calming the storm inside you. A walk around the block can remind your soul that movement is still possible. A simple act of kindness, even toward yourself, can soften the edges of your pain. 1 cup of water becomes better hydration. 5 minutes of fresh air becomes better energy. Writing a few sentences in a journal becomes emotional clarity. Saying no to one unnecessary burden becomes healthier boundaries. These tiny steps are not just habits, they are signals to your heart declaring, I deserve to heal, I deserve to rise, I deserve to rebuild. The reason micro habits matter so much is because rising from brokenness isn't about giant leaps. Giant leaps are rare, and relying on them can make you feel like you're failing every time life doesn't suddenly transform. Small steps, however, are sustainable, they are manageable, they build discipline gently without overwhelming you. And discipline, true discipline, is not harsh or rigid. It is compassionate. It recognizes that you're rebuilding from a fragile place. It gives you room to breathe, to grow, to try again. One of the most important things to understand is that micro habits create identity shifts. You become what you consistently do. If you consistently practice calm, you slowly become calmer. If you consistently practice gratitude, you slowly become more hopeful. If you consistently practice discipline, even in small amounts, you begin seeing yourself as a disciplined person. And when your identity shifts, your entire life shifts with it. Brokenness often makes you feel powerless, but micro habits return that power to you. They remind you that healing is not something that happens asterisk to asterisk you. It is something you participate in. You're not waiting passively for life to get better. You're taking part in making it better step by step, moment by moment. Small disciplines also help you break the cycle of self-neglect. When someone feels broken, they often stop taking care of themselves, not out of laziness, but out of emotional exhaustion. They stop doing the things that once made them feel alive, and they don't realize how deeply this affects them. Micro habits gently restore that care. They remind you that you are worth effort even on the days you feel unworthy, even on the days you doubt yourself, even on the days you don't believe in your own strength. These habits are also powerful because they build trust with yourself. When you say, I will do this small thing every day, and you actually follow through even if it's tiny, you begin rebuilding the trust you may have lost with yourself. And that trust is essential. You cannot rise without it. You cannot build a new life on a foundation of internal distrust. Micro habits repair that foundation little by little. Another beautiful aspect of micro habits is that they create momentum. Healing doesn't require massive motivation. It requires tiny bits of momentum repeated until they become natural. When you begin stacking these habits just one at a time, you create a rhythm of progress, and that rhythm becomes your strength. Even if life throws you off balance, even if you have hard days, you can return to these small practices. They become your reset button, your grounding, your quiet return to purpose. You don't need to overhaul your entire life to rise. You don't need to fix everything at once. You don't need to have every answer. You just need to begin with something simple, something small, something manageable, and you need to trust that each tiny step is carrying you forward even if you don't feel the impact yet. One micro habit becomes two become three. Slowly, your days start feeling different. You start waking up with a bit more clarity, a bit more strength, a bit more hope. The heaviness begins to lift, not because the world around you suddenly changed, but because you changed the way you're showing up in it. You changed the way you're caring for yourself. You changed the way you're rebuilding your inner life. And that is how rising truly happens. Not in one dramatic moment, but in the quiet, consistent, patient work of small habits leading you toward a stronger, more grounded version of yourself. Because sometimes all you need to rebuild your life is the courage to begin with one small step. One of the most overlooked truths about healing and rising is that you cannot do it alone. You can endure pain alone. You can survive heartbreak alone. You can sit in silence with your wounds alone. But truly rising, requires connection. It requires people who lift you when you forget how strong you are, people who remind you of your worth when your own thoughts turn against you, people who see in you what you cannot yet see in yourself. When you feel broken, isolation feels natural. It feels safer to withdraw. It feels easier to stay quiet than to let others see the cracks in your heart. You convince yourself that no one will understand, or that your presence will burden those around you. But that isolation, while comforting in the moment, slowly begins to suffocate the very hope you need to rise. Human beings were never created to heal in isolation. We are shaped by the people who walk beside us. We rise faster when we are supported. And this is why choosing who surrounds you is one of the most important decisions you can make when you are trying to rebuild. Not everyone who is around you is meant to help you rise. Some people drain you, some feed your fears. Some reinforce the very narratives you're trying to escape. And some, even unintentionally, tether you to the version of yourself that you have outgrown. When you're in a fragile place, these connections can pull you backward, even if you don't realize it at first. But then there are the people who call you higher. These are the people who speak to the strongest parts of you, even when you feel weak. They don't judge your brokenness, but they don't let you stay defined by it either. They challenge your excuses. They hold you accountable to the potential they see in you. They remind you that you are capable of more than surviving, that you are capable of rising. These people are not always loud. Sometimes they're quiet presences whose very character strengthens you. Sometimes they're the ones who simply refuse to let you give up on yourself. The truth is, when you're trying to rise from brokenness, you need voices around you that elevate your thinking. You need people who speak with wisdom, who live with intention, who carry integrity, who challenge you without crushing you, who correct you without shaming you, and who celebrate you without needing you to be perfect. The people around you shape the environment of your inner life, and the environment you stand in determines how high you can rise. Think about a plant placed in toxic soil. No matter how strong it is, no matter how much potential it has, no matter how desperately it tries to grow, the environment itself limits it. But place that same plant in nourishing soil under proper light, with people tending to it gently and consistently, and it will grow not because it suddenly became stronger, but because the environment supported its growth. Human hearts are no different. The right people become the soil that allows your healing to root and your rising to flourish. And this is where courage becomes essential, because sometimes rising means stepping away from people who drain you. It means distancing yourself from voices that constantly pull you back into old patterns. It means creating space between yourself and relationships that are rooted in pain, gossip, negativity, or emotional inconsistency. And that is not cruelty. That is protection. You cannot heal in a place that keeps reopening your wounds. You cannot grow in a space that belittles your attempts to rise. And you cannot rise among those who are committed to staying low. When you begin surrounding yourself with people who call you higher, your mindset shifts. Their discipline inspires your discipline. Their peace influences your calm. Their determination encourages your resilience. Their clarity challenges your confusion. You start mirroring the strength you see in them. You start absorbing their energy, their habits, their hope. Slowly, their belief in you becomes a bridge toward your own self-belief, and something even more beautiful happens. You begin to feel safe again. Not safe in the sense of avoiding pain, but safe in knowing that if you fall, someone will help you stand. Safe in knowing that your voice matters. Safe in knowing that you don't need to pretend to be perfect in order to be valued. That safety is transformative. It allows you to soften without collapsing. It allows you to open your heart without fear of being dismissed. It allows you to grow without constantly looking over your shoulder. The right people don't just support your healing, they accelerate it. They help you shift from survival to purpose. They help you rewrite your internal story. They help you build habits that strengthen you. They remind you of your potential on the days you forget it, and they walk with you, not ahead of you, not behind you, but beside you. Their presence becomes a quiet reassurance that rising is possible. But you must also remember that this is not a one-way dependency. Being surrounded by people who call you higher means that you also rise in a way that influences them. Rising is contagious. Growth is contagious. Hope is contagious. As you strengthen, you begin strengthening others. As you heal, you naturally extend gentleness to those around you. As you reclaim your purpose, you begin inspiring those who may still be stuck in their own storms. Rising with the right people creates a circle of upward movement where everyone becomes a source of encouragement for the other. The journey out of brokenness is never linear. There will be days when you feel strong and days when you feel vulnerable, days when you feel like you're moving forward and days when you feel like you're slipping back. But when you have people who call you higher, those days don't break you. They ground you. They remind you that setbacks don't define you. They remind you that healing isn't about perfection, it's about perseverance. And with them by your side, even your weakest moments become manageable. You were never meant to rise alone. You are meant to rise with people who see your potential, honor your journey, and walk with you until you see what they have seen all along. That you are capable of rising long before you believed it. Because sometimes the strength you're searching for begins with the people who refuse to let you fall. When you finally reach this stage of rising after being broken, there is something profound that unfolds within you. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's not the kind of transformation that announces itself with fanfare or applause. It's quieter, deeper, more intimate. It is the recognition that everything you've gone through, every ache, every disappointment, every loss has carved out space within you for something greater than what you had before. And sometimes the greatest challenge is not enduring the pain, but understanding that the person you are becoming through it is far more resilient than the person you were before it. When you've been broken, your sense of identity often gets scattered. You start questioning who you are, who you were, and who you're supposed to become. But what many people don't realize is that there is a unique clarity that emerges only when you've been stripped of all the noise. When everything familiar falls away, when life forces you to stand in the rubble of what you once knew, you're confronted with a choice. Either cling desperately to what has already fallen apart, or begin to build something new with what remains, and that choice, though difficult, is the beginning of transformation. What rising truly demands from us is a willingness to let go of the versions of ourselves that can no longer walk with us into the future we're being shaped for. Sometimes this means releasing certain expectations you once held tightly. Sometimes it means accepting that a certain chapter has closed so another one can be written. And sometimes it means realizing that the strength you prayed for didn't arrive in the form of ease. It arrived in the form of challenges that forced you to grow, to stretch, to become. There is a deep wisdom that comes from experiencing hardship. You start to understand that not everything painful is harmful. Some of the most painful moments in your life are the very moments that are forcing you toward your purpose. But it takes time for the heart to recognize this. It takes patience, reflection, and a lot of inner honesty. And rising isn't about pretending the pain didn't touch you. It's about acknowledging that the pain shaped you and choosing to step forward with that new strength. One of the most powerful realizations you can come to at this stage is that healing is not about going back to who you used to be. Healing is about becoming someone new, someone wiser, someone stronger, someone more aligned with truth. Whenever you move through hardship, you're shedding layers of illusion. Illusions about control, illusions about certainty, illusions about people, illusions about yourself. And while losing those illusions hurts, it also liberates you. You begin to see life more clearly. You see your own heart more clearly. and you begin to see your purpose with a sense of depth you never had before. Rising after being broken is not about regaining your old strength. It's about discovering a new strength altogether, a strength that comes from surrendering to the process rather than resisting it. Many people try to rise too quickly, rushing through the emotions, forcing themselves to move on, trying to pretend that everything is fine. But rushing the process only prolongs the pain. True rising happens slowly. It happens when you allow yourself to feel what you need to feel, when you stop fighting the journey and start trusting it, when you stop asking why everything fell apart and start asking what you are meant to learn from it. Because sometimes what breaks you is not meant to destroy you, but to break open the parts of you that were never meant to remain closed. Sometimes the breakdown is actually the breakthrough. And when you reach this final stage of rising, you begin to understand that every moment of struggle was actually preparing you for a future that requires this version of you. Not the version that was untested, unshaken, unchallenged, but the version that has walked through fire and learned to breathe again. And with that realization comes a gentle peace. You stop resenting the past. You stop fearing the future. You start embracing the present with a sense of groundedness. You realize that rising is not a single moment. It's a way of living. It's choosing again and again to stand back up, to believe again, to hope again, to trust again. It's choosing to rebuild not from desperation, but from understanding. And then something remarkable happens. You begin to feel gratitude for the strength you never knew you had, for the wisdom you gained through difficulty, for the clarity that emerged from the chaos. Gratitude not for the pain itself, but for what the pain produced within you. You look at yourself and realize that while you may not have chosen the struggle, you are grateful for the person you became because of it. And it is in this gratitude that you find your final rise, not a rise built on pressure or fear, but a rise grounded in purpose and acceptance. A rise that is steady, rooted, unshakable. A rise that carries you forward with humility, strength, and renewed vision. Because at the end of the journey, rising after being broken is not just about standing again, it's about seeing with new eyes, walking with new insight, and living with a heart that has been expanded by experience. It's about understanding that every scar tells a story not of defeat, but of revival. And it's about knowing deep down that no matter how many times life tests you, you now possess a strength that cannot be taken away. And this is where your rise becomes unstoppable.